Hello, friends. This is Keith Joseph from the Institute for Hermetic Studies. Today, I want to talk about Julius Evola and the primordial tradition. Specifically, what does Evola mean by tradition, primordial tradition, traditional, etc.? I think just, kind of looking around the internet, there's a lot of confusion about what Evola means by tradition, what's meant by primordial tradition, and that confusion leads people to criticize him, and I think they're criticizing from a place of misunderstanding. So, um, I want to lay out what I think is pretty clearly what he means by tradition, and once you have that understanding of what he means by tradition, I think his corpus kind of opens up and makes a little more sense. He doesn't write in a way that is intended to be easy to understand. He's not trying to make it accessible. He's not trying to make it introductory. And so you're just kind of jumping into the deep end and you have to kind of figure it out as you go. So, which is, I think, an interesting project. After a while, you get tired of just reading, one introduction after another. And this is a little more in depth here. So anyway, what are we talking about? I had two texts I want to discuss. So first, the Doctrine of Awakening. This is Evola's study of Theravada Buddhism. And then the other text would be the Hermetic tradition, which is Evola's study of alchemy. So this book is definitely worth taking a look at. It's worth studying carefully. Western Buddhists, at least, the ones on Reddit, don't seem to like it because they have a different understanding, somewhat Pollyanna understanding of what Buddha is talking about. This book is very orthodox. He cites the Pali extensively, and I think if you read it with an open mind, you'll see that he's um, being very true to the original texts. The passage I wanted to talk about, and it's a little long, so I won't read it, but it's on page 85 in here if you want to take a look at it for yourself. It's called The Visit to Brahma, and it's Buddha is some visionary state or meditative state. He's in the kind of supreme celestial realm. Brahma is God and it's heaven, and um it's kind of the highest state of existence. That's the idea. And so, Buddha arrives and Brahma is like, "Welcome, this is fantastic. You achieved liberation. You're in the ultimate realm. There's nothing higher. This is the permanent, everlasting, eternal place." And Buddha says no, and he says this three-part formulation that Evola quotes often. This is not me, this is not mine, this I am not, this is not myself. And then Mara, the tempter, the um deceiver, comes, and he's disguised as one of Brahma's celestial being retinue, and similarly says, "Look, this is it. If you don't yield here, you're going to be destroyed. You'll die. There's nothing else. This is the highest realm. You must submit. Brahma is all powerful and omnipotent, and so forth." And then Brahma lays into him some more. But Buddha says, again, this is not mine. This is not me. This is not myself. And so, in this way, he achieves liberation, which in the tradition is called nibbana, meaning the unconditioned beyond being and non-being. And that is exactly what Evola means by tradition. That's what he's talking about. A path, a system, if you like, that leads to that um, understanding, realization. Um, it's not quite right to say being, but that state. It's difficult to talk about a little bit because, in a way, it's beyond language. So that's the doctrine of awakening. He makes the same point in the Hermetic tradition. Sorry, I'm trying to get it out of the light so you can see it. But this is the Hermetic tradition, Symbols and Teachings of the Royal Art um, by Evola. And I just want to read a short passage from here. Evola says, "This is especially so when we come to the problem of immortality. The Hermetic work carried to the red stage is related to the supreme supercosmic conception of immortality. The conception is not easy to understand for a civilization that has long lost it. God understood theistically as being, so just as an aside, God understood theistically as being is the same as Brahma in the Doctrine of Awakening. God understood theistically as being and our identification with being, excuse me. God understood theistically as a being and our identification with that being serve as limits beyond which it is absurd to imagine or to want anything else. But in the initiatic teaching, the supreme state lies beyond being and non-being. According to the cosmic myth of the cycles, in this non-differentiation, which is identical to the absolute transcendence, even the personal God himself and all his heavens are reabsorbed in the moment of the great dissolution. The ultimate perfection of the work, which has been attained when the earth has been entirely dissolved and united with the poison, means to have succeeded in reaching this outermost limit. At this point, no further reabsorption is possible. The royal initiate, garbed in red, is a survivor who remains even as in the myth of the cycles when the world's men, God, and gods go under. So, this is the same understanding, the same teaching in a different form. And that's what Evola means by tradition. That the Hermetic tradition is a tradition for Evola because it leads to that, because it has that understanding built in. Understanding that is the key to understanding Evola's corpus. So if you look at sometimes Revolt Against the Modern World, Men Among the Ruins, Ride the Tiger. These are, you know, considered to be separate or different than Evola's overtly esoteric work. That's a mistake. It's one corpus, the same themes, the same concerns, the same understanding is being presented in all of these works. I'm not saying that Evola doesn't develop and his ideas don't develop, but his understanding of tradition is the same in the Hermetic tradition as it is in Revolt Against the Modern World. That's what he's talking about. So in Revolt Against the Modern World, for example, he's not so much talking about individual practice and, you know, your own development. He's talking about civilizations. But what qualifies as a traditional civilization for Evola is that it's ordered to that ultimate transcendence beyond being and non-being. That's that understanding is in the civilization and the way that it's structured. the king in that civilization has that understanding and is emerging from that or is ruling from that. And the mark of that king's legitimacy and his authority is that that king rules without violence because violence is unnecessary when the travel, it's an empire when it's properly ordered. And when you have violence, that is actually a symptom of dissolution. That's a symptom that something is out of order, that the um, authority is no longer legitimate. And so, Revolt Against the Modern World, Evola is tracing that dissolution, and he says explicitly, he says the 20th century totalitarian regimes with the violence of the world wars is the sign or a sign or the ultimate really um, of this dissolution. So that's what I want to explain how I understand what Evola means by tradition. And then, he calls the Hermetic tradition a royal art. In the Doctrine of Awakening, he's very concerned or emphasizes that Buddha was a prince, that he was in the warrior caste. For Evola, the separation of the king and the priest is a sign of dissolution. The king um, has the function of a priest in a pure tradition um, before things start to break apart. And so that's part of the signature of a tradition. That also distinguishes Evola from someone like Rene Guénon and some of the other traditionalists. He has a very specific understanding of what he means by tradition. So I hope that's helpful. That's really what I have for today. I had two requests of you, um, advice perhaps. I'm asking for you to give me advice. Um, One, I make these videos, I think about it, I plan it in my mind, but really when I'm actually doing the speaking, I'm speaking from my heart and I'm not, it's not scripted in any way. I prefer that. I feel like it's more human. There's no danger of AI. I'm becoming more and more frustrated reading authors who I, otherwise respect and sometimes admire their work. And when I read them and they're just giving me an AI produced article, I find it very disconcerting. Um, and it's not even I'm not being anti-AI even. I think that it's a useful tool, but not to take the place of the human voice. That's not an appropriate use for it. That's one thing. Um, but if you think that the video should be more scripted and you enjoy that more when there's no pauses and thinking, let me know. I'm willing to get better at this. This is my own instinct, and so I'm just letting you know what I'm thinking. Secondly, Mark Stavish, the director of the Institute for Hermetic Studies, my teacher, and I have been talking about trying to put together an Evola class from the Institute, probably on the three books of magic in some fashion. I mean, that's probably 1,000 pages. So, we would figure out how to present that material. But if that's something that you would be interested in and want to see, let me know in the comments, please, just so I have an idea of what um, the level of interest is. And I will, like I said last time, I'm going to continue making videos. I'm going to try to come out with one a week. I will, in the next video, I think, get back to the introduction to magic. Um, at some point, I'd like to talk about this in depth also, the Hermetic tradition text. It's a really interesting book from Evola. So Let me know what you think of that. If you've what you think of my idea of the tradition. If you have thoughts about what it means, criticisms, comments, I would love to engage with you, and I'll see you in the next video.